right, good everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever you guys are doing to watch this show. This is Whiskey Wednesday Weekly with your host, Ken Boone. This week we have a very, very, very unique, successful, driven, I love her story. Paula Dezzutti, a.k.a. Pixie. That's what she's known by. Everyone loves her by that name. And she'll get into why that name got adopted probably, I don't know, not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, I guess. Well, first of all, welcome, Pixie. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, you, first of all, with your story, and it just intrigued me. First of all, Pixie and I just met through an email. Actually, I support and know and had Tyler Boone on the show 2 months ago. And so I love his bourbon. It's actually one of my wife's favorites and my favorite as well. And I emailed her out of random. I emailed Pixie like with a customer service question, and she's like, "Oh, that's not me, but cool name, by the way," because obviously Ken Boone. And so anyway, I reached out to her, and she said she would love to be on here. So first of all, thank you so much. And her story and her success, we're going to get into that a lot here in a minute. So first of all, where do we find you today? Where are you at?
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, at my distillery, the Striped Pig Distillery. Okay. Our company is called Local Choice, also known as Local Choice Spirits. And our distillery and our mascot, the Striped Pig, is where I'm hanging out at the distillery bar right now. Been doing tours all day. And I'm so glad that you reached out and somehow it got to my inbox, which is a miracle. But there's no accidents, right? And here we are.
There you go. I remember that's part of your thing is you're saying you picked your parents and you picked this. And so you picked it this minute that we're talking. So I will get into that too. I love that as well. That being said, we'll go into a lot more about how you became successful with the distillery, but what does the Striped Pig mean?
It's a great question. And I hear it 100 times a day and I never get tired of telling it. So all the highly regulated rules and governance around alcohol have been around, since the beginning of the legalization of alcohol. And back in the 1700s, in the government's attempt to control consumer spending on alcohol and consumer consumption, they created what was called the 15-Gallon Act. And they decided that if they could outprice people out of the marketplace by requiring them to buy a minimum of 15 gallons or more of alcohol, that they would control consumption. So there was a woman in Benham, Massachusetts, who, along with her husband, figured out that if they could create a little circus with the opportunity to come and see the Striped Pig. So think about along the side of the road where you have these pay to see, an albino alligator, right? Now it was come and pay a nickel to see the Striped Pig. And you would come in and you'd be walked down through to her speakeasy and come out stumbling a little comically with having a grog of rum. And so the word got around pretty much to everybody that if you paid to go see the Striped Pig, you could have a good time. And then if you literally Google the Striped Pig in U.S. history, what happened was the Striped Pig became the cartoon caricature for the symbol of all political cartoons for less taxation, less government control, more consumer spending. Wow. And I'm like, okay, here we are 350 years later. I'm a woman in the distilling business trying to figure out how to navigate the hugely convoluted, highly regulatory, rules around alcohol. And so let's keep the Striped Pig going. Less government taxation, more consumer control. 350 years later, we're still fighting for the same thing. So you can pay a nickel and come see my Striped Pig.
So the part that I really want people to understand, other than the amazing whiskey story and how successful you are today, is really where you came from. Like, where is it that, not born and all that good stuff. I think you're from Connecticut originally. It's all over your posts and stuff. So that's pretty easy to understand. But you being a mom of 9, I believe you mentioned, correct? Mm-hmm. How did you start your journey with 9 kids and really kind of start being a business professional? Just take us through the first 5 minutes, of that and kind of where you, before you became as big as you are now.
Sure. Well, I think I was always in business first. I started my first business when I was 9 years old. So business came before the babies. And, people ask me this all the time. It's not like when I was a kid, I said, oh, when I grow up, I want to have 9 babies and name them all with an R and Y. And I want to, and I want to be in the liquor business. Like that was the furthest thing from anything in my consciousness. But I do believe that somehow these experiences we go through are, meant to take us on a growth path and get the lessons that we need to learn. And sometimes they say, I don't know, alien abduction, because who would think of these things? Like you can't even think you're going to grow up and have this be your life, right? It's just crazy.
Right.
So it just happened. And then I was always on Wall Street and a financial planner and doing real estate development I bought and sold my first house when I was 18. So I was just always at a young age. And then I had a great education, went into finance and always did business development. And I was building golf resorts and involved in a lot of hotel development, timeshares, water parks, and got asked to come and consult and help a technology company in the spirit space kind of move out of R&D and into manufacturing. And I became an early investor in that company and fell in love with the industry. And as with so many designations after my name in the finance field, I looked at the Tax and Trade Bureau around alcohol and said, you've got to be kidding me. And then the fact that statistically, it's like less than 1% of distilleries around the world are owned by women. And it really gave me an opportunity to do something besides being an investor, and opportunity to be an operator that created new pathways and platforms that were disruptive in how alcohol was distributed through the US, brought in a lot of diversity players, and opened the doors for women to really have a larger say and a presence and vision and a voice in a traditionally male-dominated industry, but certainly a very archaic industry to begin with. So I just started pushing the envelope and trying to understand why things were the way they were, and fought for the strategies to work around the regulations, to fight for changes in the regulations, but then to create a platform. We're almost like an incubator accelerator platform that really allows people to take their passion and come into the branding space. And it's an amazing industry for all people, but for women specifically, our tongues are organoleptically more defined to be able to have really great tactile and taste functions. And women like to nurture. I guess, we're satisfied, and men get their testosterone boost by saving the day, and women kind of get their serotonin and estrogen levels from nurturing and loving. And it's really a hospitality play. It's like cooking in the kitchen. It's very creative to come up with all of the new products and the recipes. And then it stimulates what I need for both my right and left brain to be able to, get into big industry. And it is the most lucrative industry on the planet.
Wow. That's pretty cool. That in a nutshell is a lot to take in. But what's awesome about that is I picked up on a few things. First of all, lucrative for sure, especially, whiskey's kind of over the last 10 years taken this huge leap, right? I mean, first it was always wine tasting, and, you hear, and great call on the ladies' palates, because my wife and I actually were involved in, a friend of ours wrote a couple books on wine tasting and different ratings, and we were involved in the parties, and I couldn't pull off all those notes and the stuff that people talked about. It just wasn't my thing. But she was always able to do that, right? And so when she started taking on the whiskey tasting and being a huge fan of whiskey, she's able to do that way better than I am, right? I'm just more like, man, that's good. I know some guys are pros at it, and I get it that people out there put all their stuff out there and they're like, oh, I taste the orange and the whatever. I'm like, no, you don't. So, it just sounds real good. I said, I trust the ladies on that. But you're talking about being an innovator in an industry where it was never really accepted, correct? To be a female.
There's really not been too much innovation. We're definitely making a mark now. But what's driving that are outside industries. So COVID specifically has really driven so many changes in hospitality, right? And alcohol consumption, which of course, no matter what, goes up every year. It is a recession proof and prohibition proof and temperance proof and 15-gallon act proof and COVID proof. I mean, the industry just seems to always thrive. And even in times of celebration and good times, then there's more thriving. Mm-hmm. So that takes care of itself. The innovation is coming from the fact that delivery of the spirits to the consumer and the consumers need to recognize their instant gratification space, right? They're used to going online and hitting an Amazon button and having it show up on their door an hour later. And that's reconditioning the way that they purchase. With spirits, because the states are so different, and even the counties within each state are so different, it's been a model that's pretty archaic in that you have to get off the couch, drive to a liquor store, right, buy some spirits. It's hard to get direct to consumer, although we're launching a new platform called Alchemy by the Gallon that should go live in the next 2 weeks. And that will be a direct to consumer play. It took a long time to set up fulfillment centers so that we could move our distribution through what they call the 3-tier system to legally get to distribute. But then through COVID, states like Kentucky and DC and 16 other states have said, you know what, we can do wine direct to the consumer. Why has this been this prohibition that we couldn't do spirits direct to the consumer? And then with Uber buying Drizzly and so many things happening to change the industry and the way the customer has an expectation to now get their spirits delivered as well. So it's going to be interesting, the changes that happen over the next couple of years, and it's happening fast.
Yeah. Well, you talk about that, and that's a good point, because I didn't even think about the wine thing. Like, you can always ship wine to homes, like through memberships and stuff. And I went to order a bottle of really good stuff from my buddy who lives about an hour south. I was like, I'm not going to drive down there. I'll just ship him something. And it said, you can't ship it. Like, I went to the post office with a bottle. And I guess I was dumb enough to say, liquid or whatever. I'm like, yeah, there's alcohol in there. Like, oh, you can't do that. I'm like, oh, but I can order it from Flavier, right? And they can send it to me. So what's the difference? Whether I send it to my friend or they ship it to me in a box? It's just weird. But that's good.
Well, here's the good news is the U.S. Postal Service just announced that they applied for their alcohol license. So now the distributors are all up in arms because they don't want them to do it. Everybody wants to have their own little secret corner and monopoly on the space. But I'm like, okay, once Amazon applied for their distribution license and now the Postal Service, it's going to change. But yes, you as a consumer cannot ship. Me as a manufacturer could not ship. So I have all people come visit us, especially Charleston is, tourist destination of the world. They come from all over the place and they try our products and they want to have them shipped back to them, especially if they've, flown in. And it's really a challenge. So I have to send to my fulfillment centers who are retail locations who then ship directly to somebody else. But I'm really hopeful that now that they're changing the laws that me as a manufacturer and distiller can ship direct in some states, that those states will start to open up once they realize how much revenue they're missing by not being on the bandwagon.
Wow. Well, that you're definitely moving and shaking, that's for sure. And doing it all. You have 8 grandkids now too, you mentioned, right? 9,
yes.
8 grandkids. So you probably don't sleep very often, I would assume.
I sleep from 12 to 3 and then from 5 to 9.
5 to 9 in the afternoon or 5 to 9
in the morning?
Oh, okay. So I
go to bed around midnight and I'll get 3 hours of really sound sleep. I'm usually up between 3 and 5 thinking, I have great ideas in my dreams and then I want to research things. For me, it's research. I'll think about something and then I'm so totally tuned in and turned on to whatever I was thinking that I've got to research it right then. And then I fall back asleep around 5 and I allow myself to at least sleep till 9 because I got to get some sleep.
You need some sleep. Yeah. What's funny is you say that. I'm very much that same type of personality. I'm pretty driven that way. And my kids are always like, you never stop. Like you're almost 50 and you're doing more than, like me, and I'm 18, and obviously there's experience in there and things like that. But it's funny. I wake up 3 or 4 in the morning, can't sleep. I'll just go to my computer and just start. If I'm going to sit here for an hour in bed and just do nothing with my brain and not be able to fall asleep, I might as well go up and do some work, right? And get some stuff done.
Right.
My problem is I can't go back to sleep. So on those mornings, I'm on a 4 or 5 day hour, that's about it. But I do want to kind of get into and go back a little bit, not because all this stuff isn't great, but the fact that, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you became, not so much Pixie, that's later, but there's a lot of things you brought up, or that if you know your story a little bit, like I do, you made a magazine, you were in the financial industry. I mean, how did all this occur and have kids at the same time? I mean, how long of a span did you really go before you became, into the whiskey business?
Well, I had 6 of my kids work for the company now, and I had, I told you I was kind of doing my career, my education all at the same time, and got into finance really early. So I had a great education to really understand how business, was developed. And I literally started business when I was 9. My first business was an Avon company, and I wanted to do it so badly that my mom had to sign for me because you couldn't do it before you were 18. I literally have like a 40-year pin for selling Avon. I mean, it's just been crazy. And I loved it. My cousin had a beauty salon, a hair salon, and I would go and pass out the little books and give the little lipstick samples and just take orders. And then I grew my business, and I just got so addicted I love serving people, and I love figuring out how to make money. And I didn't like to go sit in one location. I really wanted to have interface with people. So to go sit at a job, I got a master's in gifted education, and I started being a teacher. But even that, I went to the University of Hamburg to get a quick master's education in gifted education, came back, started teaching, and already was disruptive in the space because I was bringing the European way of teaching kids. I was teaching 8th grade math back to the students. So I had all the kids laying on the floor playing with blocks to be able to teach them fractions, because that was the most intuitive way to learn something. And the administration was like, you can't be on the floor with kids. You have to be blah, 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 blah. I couldn't. So I had trouble playing by the rules of their curriculum. And in the middle of teaching, I was approached by IDS Financial Services, which is now, then became American Express, which is now Ameriprise. And they said, we'll double your salary. Will you take this test? So I took the Series 7, which is the stockbroker's test. And they said they had never had such a high score, sat me down. And at this point, I was like 24. And but by the time I think by the time I was 24 or 25, I was on my 5th pregnancy. So I had 5 kids in 4 years, and then I had 4 kids in the next 6 years. So basically I was pregnant for 17 years straight. But my youngest is 20 and my eldest is 39. I want to say, I got to do the math. What's 3 from 21? 38. So I just kept going, and after 4, it's all a blur. And they all start to take care of each other. But I don't know. When I look back now, I mean, I don't even want to babysit my grandchildren. Like, I'm overwhelmed. I want to babysit them, but I'm overwhelmed with, like, I don't know what to do. So I have no clue how I did it. Honestly, I don't. But my kids will say, you didn't. We all took care of each other. So I think there's some dynamics in, a really large family. And then when they all got into high school, I said, okay, I'm going to teach you guys business. My kids volunteered me for everything growing up because they were like, oh, my mommy doesn't work, because I did everything from home, right? Because I was self-employed my whole life, I picked careers that I could do whatever I had to do in the hours that I need to do them. I would be taking little kids in car seats and rockers under my desk, putting together some major financial plan and just rocking them with my feet, and one on a hip, and I nursed all my kids too. It was craziness. I said alien abduction. I don't know how I did it. And I just said to them, what do you want to do for business? You all need jobs. Let's figure this out. And they said, they wanted to do ice cream. So we bought an old building in Litchfield, Connecticut on Banham Lake, and restored an old historic building and turned it into the Gourmet Cafe. And that's where they learned how to serve people, how to do inventory control, how to manage money, how to cook. how to clean, how to control customers, how to do purchase orders and invoices. It was really a great experience. And they had to work out amongst themselves who was going to go open up, who was going to stay late, who was going to do floors. But it was really a good learning experience for them to learn how to run businesses. So when they went off to college, we sold out of that. And I was doing real estate development through most of Florida. And I ended up as, coming in as a consultant on this tech play. And I called them up and I said, okay, I want to open a distillery. And they're like, you want to do what? They're like, you don't even drink. I'm like, yeah, I know this is true. I don't drink. And I put ice in my red wine at that time and had no sophisticated palate, but I loved the industry. And it truly is like the only asymmetrical investment. I looked at it from the investment perspective. If you don't drink something, hey, the bourbons. If you don't, bourbon appreciates by 400% a year as it is. And if you don't drink it this year, it becomes that more valuable next year. So what other industry works like this, And then the multiple of revenue on the products is to 200 times. A traditional business model, you're looking at 5 to 7 times a multiple of revenue. In the spirit space, if you build a brand and you move enough cases, you're looking at 200 times. If you put a real estate play underneath it, like the Stripe Pig Distillery, that jumps to a multiple of 2,000 times. Now that's if you're the ones that make it, if you're the 1% that grabs that brand and makes it happen. And I thought, no, mind you, I started this back in 2007. iPhone was just coming out. So when I literally had a dream about how to interrupt this space, and I wanted to not just be in contract battling, but I wanted to be an incubator accelerator program where I could bring people on and we could partner. I love the partnership play. It also escaped me that, I told you, like I'm the least likely person not drinking and putting ice in my red wine, but also I was an ordained minister. I went to seminary because I was so wanted to get lectern certificates so that I could get up. I was raised Catholic and I wanted to be able to deliver the readings. And I was fighting to get to the point where I could give out communion. And that eventually happened, but women were not allowed to do that back in the day. So I was always driven to this concept of spirituality and metaphysics and how do things work. And the inventor of the technology that I came into the business with originally said to me, did it ever occur to you that you are the one that's been brought into this business to do something really spiritual within the space? And I thought, I don't think so. But he was so brilliant. And he knew. He was a brilliant chemist. And he knew. And I feel like I'm living for his honor because he called it out way back then. And then since then, it's been an incredible journey, the hardest I've ever been on. And I've been through everything in my life. And this is the hardest thing. But the rewards that I envision happening at the end of the journey are so tangible for me that I just keep going.
So you bring up, you've brought it up 3 or 4 times now. First of all, yes, I mean, I love that, like that whole, like we're missing a lot, and I'm going to have, people are going to have to look up your story a little bit to dig in between the crevices, because based on, what you've, I've already read, there's so much in between, and it's just like a whirlwind that you just started at such a young age and then just never stopped. So there's all these things in between that happened, like, being, top 50, in 2020, influencers and successful women and all these magazines and Forbes and the Wall Street Journal and all these things that you've done and accomplished have just come from the hard work, is what I feel like. Those are just byproducts. Not, you didn't just strive for that. You were just doing your thing. And then all of a sudden, all these other opportunities brought up. But you talk a lot about, there's 2 theories that I want to talk about, or not theories, but you talk about disruptive all the time. And I think a lot of people think that's a bad thing, but the way you're using it, I believe that you're saying that's just your disruption is more like your overall, what you're not trying to disrupt anything in a bad way. You're trying to think of better ways to do something or disrupt the norm, right? Which we're all just on this rat trap sometimes. And you disrupting it gives you the the ability to create, and that's where I think the word disruptive is being used. Am I right?
Yes, I would call it a change agent, right? It's innovation, but you have to disrupt to create change, and people are fearful of change. And so that's why it's disruptive, because I'm a change agent. But you're absolutely right. It's not in a negative way. We get so conditioned to do everything the same way. And the people that control the powers and have monopolies over the way things are done, especially prior to all the technologies that we have. That's what I was saying. When I'm doing all this back before the iPhone was even coming out, I was looked at like I was some crazy person, thinking out there about influencers and a partnership play and putting a nonprofit cause marketing initiative behind local choice. Local choice, our hashtag, what's in your spirit, pour it forward, sip and share. I launched the company saying we're going to give $2 a bottle back for anybody who purchases our products in conjunction with a community education program or a nonprofit. And everyone said, there's no money in that. You're going to run out of it. And I'm like, yes, there is money. And I used to teach cause marketing for American Express and for numerous, as an, again, nonprofit. That's a new way. This is prior to Warby Parker and Tom Shoes and, Paul Newman's own. So especially taking that in the spirit space and saying, well, how could that work? And I said, look, if I could make you the best guy in the room, and we could all the events that happen around nonprofits are typically by people who are volunteers. They have an annual gala that they'll spend $250 to dress up in a black tie and get to the event. They've got to rally around getting everybody there. They're running around for donations. They're not event planners, right? They're nonprofit runners, but yet their events are their major fundraisers. And they get to everybody gets out of the car. What do you say? Oh, it's $250. Put on a black tie. In the name of charity, I'm going to go. But the first question is there an open bar? If you said there's no bar, you'd be like, hard to get that money. Not happening. But you're like, it's an open bar. So you get out of the car and you go to the bar. And I'm like, no one's leveraging the bar. That bar can become the ongoing fundraising mechanism all year long. And now with technology and one little link, you could link your nonprofit or your event or your education program or even your business model to an online link and be able to get, we now call them influencers and the links for affiliate links, right? They're affiliate programs. So it's the same. It just took time to label these ideas and concepts and put them together. But I had the vision back then, and thank God I put it together because it takes time to build this infrastructure and get the platform. And now we're ready. We just had to wait for the universe to catch up with us.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you bring that up because I'm sure that, true influencers are people like you. And I'm not knocking anyone that's considered an influencer, but I feel like just, because you throw up some good looking lady and she wears a shirt or something that someone likes, I find that hard to be an influencer. Not, like I said, if they're doing it, great. But there's people like you who are true influencers, that have shown and turned the corner for women and people in general. But it sounds like, you were talking about your story and how you really want to make sure that women's voices are heard and they, have a different, not that I think you even mentioned like cooking. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's just a passion that some people have. I'm the cook of the house because I love it. It's my joy to feed people and really make a good meal. Right.
Yes.
My wife's like, she does amazing other things, but that's not her thing. So it doesn't always have to be, branded in like the way you're talking about, like the old guys club, right? With whiskey and stuff like that. It's kind of an old tale, but you have this, and again, I think it's a way of life. I had a struggle with how you worded it or how you wanted me to bring it up, but I know it's not a theory. It's actually the way you live your life.
Like thematics. It's my theme. Yeah.
Yeah. Passion versus, what is it?
Purpose.
Sorry. I was thinking productivity in my head for some reason because you're so energetic. Passion versus purpose. So I read it a couple different times and what it is. So give the audience in a nutshell what it is that this is for you. And I love it. It's 100% true. It's like I said, I don't think it's like a theory because it's real. It's not like your idea. It's just the way you live your life. So go into detail a little bit about that.
I was fortunate enough to have a distinction early on that there was a difference between passion and purpose. And most people say, you know, do what you love, find what you're passionate about, follow your passion and the money will follow, or create a career around the things that really excite you. And I think that's all of those things are true. But I recognized really early that passion is really coming from outside of you, and it comes and goes and it flares and wanes. You could be the most passionate about something and then shortly after have the complete opposite reaction, you know, hate something. You could love something and then hate something. Think about how many times people reinvent themselves or change their careers. So trying to keep the passion from waning when you don't feel well, when you're tired, when you are disillusioned, when you're frustrated, you could lose that passion pretty quickly and second guess or doubt your abilities. And that is what gets in your way. I realized that if you focus more on really understanding what your purpose is in life, that purpose will never leave you. And that is really not defined by something outside of you, like passion, but it's really designed by your core. And what, you know, depending on what you believe, I believe we come into this universe to be able to experience contrast. And that contrast helps us to know ourselves. And the more we know ourselves and our true soul or our core energy, our beingness, it doesn't matter what the situation or the environment is. It doesn't matter whether you're a garbage man, a teacher, a nurse, or a spirits developer. Because if you know what your core purpose is, you get the freedom to go do whatever you want because you're not out of alignment. And it doesn't matter what your passion is. Even if you don't feel good about something a day, I lose it lots of times. I get disillusioned and distracted. But I go, wait a minute. Am I out of alignment with my purpose or just my passion? And my purpose for me is unconditional love and possibility. I don't want to be told no. I don't want to be told there's limitations because I know that's not true. That's either coming from something outside of me or somebody else. But who says? There are examples of miracles everywhere on the planet for forever. So we know there's no such thing as limitations, except for the ones we set on ourselves. So once I know that everything is possible, then I'm thinking, what is the point? Why be on the planet? What are we really truly here to experience? And for me, that's love. And I think that our drive comes from, if we reduce it to two core emotions, that would be love and fear. And so for me, I know what my purpose is. It's unconditional love and possibility. And so through my careers, as long as I was in alignment, you never feel like you're failing. You never feel like you're losing or you're behind because you're identifying with your core purpose. And in this space right now, it is a platform of love and possibility. You know, our hashtag, what's in your spirit? We are about building inspiration, not creating spirits. And I can liken this, it's a far stretch, but I got to tell you, if you believe, even if you don't believe, there is one of the greatest stories ever told is about the life of Jesus Christ, the man Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ on planet Earth, I say, let's fast forward reality TV and go back 2,000 years. If there's a God and this God is so omniscient and he knows absolutely everything, and he says, we're going to create this man, Jesus Christ. We're going to put him on the planet. We're going to have an amazing storyline. And this is going to be the big reveal for our show. And this show has got to last season after season after season. And I'm going to get an executive director. Let me call her Mary. And okay, Mary, it is now your job to come up with a storyline that's going to really be a groundbreaking opener. We want everybody tuning in. And they come up with a storyline of having a virgin birth from this lowly carpenter who's going to come and save the world. Okay, great story. It works. And now we've got the big reveal, Jesus Christ on planet Earth. And this omniscient producer says, okay, what's the thing he's going to do that's going to get everybody's attention? Is it raising Lazarus from the dead? Nope. Parting the Red Sea? Nope. Restoring sight to the blind? Nope. Oh, I know. We'll have him turn water into wine at the Feast of Canaan. So now you know everything. You're omniscient. You're creating the big reveal that's going to last a lifetime amongst generations and amongst cultures, no matter where they are on the planet. And the story was turning water into wine. And I thought, well, if that was good enough for Jesus Christ, then I have been tasked to turn water into vodka and gin and whiskey and bourbon and tequila and moonshine and maybe some beer and some wines, then so be it. Who am I to argue with omniscience?
Awesome. That's awesome. I love that story.
So I really look at that stretch and I say, I'm of preaching the gospel here. And there's so many miracles in those stories and how you can relate them to spirits. And why are they called spirits to begin with? And then Jesus, okay, now we've been through a bunch of seasons and we're going to close down this show on a high note. His last recorded miracle is turning water into wine at the Last Supper, and the glass of wine becomes the symbol of everlasting life. So I'm like, okay, drink my vodka and you'll find the fountain of youth. You know, it's like, it's a stretch, but it works. And it worked for the big boys. So I'm borrowing it and it's working. And it's just miraculous what happens. And people really do report that miracles happen to them when they talk about and drink our spirits.
That's awesome. Well, I like that comparison and what you had talked about. But when you said what's in your spirit, I mean, that to me, before you even got to that story, I was thinking, that is such a great thing because you're talking about spirit as a liquor, but in reality, what's in your spirit is what's in your soul and you as a person. So
yes,
again, just another amazing, you know, like the way your mind's thinking and you know, you're a rarity. I mean, I know that you want to sit there and believe me, I put all the effort into things and I believe that you can set your own mind and do your own thing. But I'm just saying you are rare because not a lot of people do or take the action that's required to put the work in. So it doesn't mean, like you said, everyone can do it if they choose to do it. Or if they choose to take the faith and the attitude and the personality that you have. We are all certainly given with a different attitude, and you were blessed with a very high energy and spiritual and amazing attitude. So that's one of the reasons why I think you're just so, you know, I guess drawn, you know, people are drawn to you because you give that out because
I'm filled with the Holy Spirit.
And your purpose, you just said, your purpose on life is to share and fill people's love cups up in a sense, right?
Yes.
And it just so happens that you do it while you're, you know, running multi-million-dollar businesses and things like that. So I love it. I love it. So I wanted to get into a little bit. Now we'll do some bourbon. So while I taste Boons Bourbon, tell me a little bit about, I know you've got your own, but tell me a little bit about the story of how this relationship came to be with Boons Bourbon.
Sure. It's not my own. So our platform, I own all of my brands and I bring partners into our space. So Tyler Boone, who's an amazing human being, but also a great artist, wanted to do a bourbon. And so he, just like all people who come into this space, when they're doing their homework and they realize how capital intensive it is, it's really challenging to get the capital, but even if they get the capital, managing the regulatory work and trying to get distribution is really challenging. And if you're good at marketing, you have a good chance. So my platform is to say, look, I'll provide the infrastructure. And if you want to partner with me and we're full on partners, like it's not an endorsement deal, I call it more an enforcement deal because we have to be equally yoked to be able to go make it happen. I have to leverage my skills and what I bring to the table with my partners. And Tyler's one of the rarities in that he was like, I am in, I'm going to hustle this. And he does. Yeah. And so we have Guinness Book of World Records, you know, out of the gate. Of course, I make a really good bourbon and I'm very, very technical about making sure it is really good. We've won so many awards and just Forbes listed it as the top 6 bourbons of the world. So, so Boons Bourbon is, you know, my pride and joy. And then we do a couple other bourbons. I don't cannibalize any of my brands. They each have their very own unique story because then we can line them up on a shelf next to each other. So the Boons Bourbon story is the fact that it's 117 proof, you know, straight out of the cask, single barrel, and it's, you know, it's pretty high proof. And even though it's only aged about a year, it's pretty darn good, as you know, which is why it's winning all these awards next to 5, 6, 10-year-old bourbons, you know, really great stuff.
I do.
So
I do know.
our motto is we don't let it out of the building yet. We've gotten a bunch of awards, and then build them out. It's just quality and our commitment. We do things because we're a family-run business. It happens here. We're small enough to still be small craft, but we're large enough to have global distribution. So we're throughout the United States, and we're working on our third country. And Mick Boone, Tyler's dad, he'll come in here and sit at the bottling line and do the hustle work. I mean, and it takes hustle in this. So he'll bottle out a couple hundred minis sitting there on the machines and getting them all done. It takes a lot of work. My kids are running the master operations and making things happen on the large scale and the bottling lines. But those tiny little details are so important, and nobody wants to do that work. Mick will be in here doing it. Tyler will be out. He never lets his foot off the pedal from the marketing perspective.
That's
now, you got to have a good product. If you're going to talk a good game and a big game like that, you've got to have a good product. So they got to go hand in hand. People will buy it once because you're a celebrity, but they're only going to rebuy it because it's good.
That's for sure. I like that because that's true. I mean, how that works with celebrity endorsing all these alcohols. It's got to be actually good before it works. You can put your name on it all you want, but if it's not good, no one's going to keep buying it just because, ABC actor or ABC musician or whoever is behind it. And Tyler Boone, again, with this whiskey, I bought it because of the name. Obviously it was just the easy choice.
There's some feeling there.
Yeah. And so once I got to taste it and meet him and talk to him, it doesn't matter who's behind it necessarily, but to me, I appreciate his story and now you, and it just makes it taste even better, knowing the work and the sweat and the effort. I mean, I got the Mick Boone sign bottle.
Yes.
He probably signed a few of them at the place, right?
Yes.
So I've got one of the bottles that I kept around because I probably won't, once he gets bigger, you won't be able to sign them all, right? So that's
right.
That might be a cool little keep. So let's talk a little bit about the other things that you do and how people can get them,
Sure.
other products that you have.
Well, it's funny you said his story, and I'm going to say her story, right? And this is Women's History Month, so I'll put in that plug. But it is really like her story here, but it is history. We're making history every step of the way. One, with innovative women's voice, which is just a different perspective because, we're different. Let's face it. Culturally, the more embracing of diversity we have, the better we're going to be. That saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So our strength comes from having a whole bunch of eyeballs and viewpoints. And that's what's kept us, really alive. But we have over 50 products in the marketplace, and I've won, as of this week, 202 international awards. We just got Distillery of the Year. Again, it's like 7 years in a row. So we're really excited about that. We're the first female distillery in South Carolina and the first distillery since Prohibition in Charleston. A lot of times I'll say the first female to do this or the first female to do this, but then now my team reminds me all the time, you're the first person to do this. We're setting all kinds of records that are disruptive in the space. So it's really just the first person to do a lot of these things. We just released a bourbon called, this was a Striped Pig bourbon. It's a bottled in bond designation, and it's very rare. It has to get the bottled in bond designation, it has to have come out of one barrel, all bottled out at the same time, sit in a location for at least 4 years, be bottled at 100 proof, and come from one appellate, one season, one distiller. So we started in 2013, the Striped Pig Distillery, and this was the barrel we laid down in 2014. So it's the first bottled in bond designation in South Carolina. So we made herstory again. And it's been really exciting. We went on the news Monday with the release, and within like an hour or two, 3/4 of them were sold out. So we only got 140 bottles out of the barrel because this is almost 7 years old. So every year you're going to get the angel share evaporation, and they took, typical barrel will get about 288 bottles out of. So angel share over 7 years, they took about half.
Wow. Now, you were saying they almost sold out. Like, let's say, for instance, I wanted to get a bottle.
We use a system called FedEx 21, where FedEx is allowed to ship alcohol for distillers. and we can send to retail locations. And then for our online fulfillment store, we can ship it because it's coming out of our retail location. So you can buy products at either localchoicespirits.com. That's pretty much where you buy everything, localchoicespirits.com. And then on the Striped Pig website, you can find it there. And in South Carolina, of course, people can come to the distillery and pick it up.
Okay, cool. Well, I love that. So you make, what other things do you make other than bourbon? I think you listed a whole bunch of other stuff, but let's say you had mentioned the bottles behind you.
Yeah, you can see a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, so are they all made at that distillery or somewhere else?
Yes. So we have what we call a just-in-time manufacturing model. Think about it. You mentioned you like to cook. Think about when you go to the fridge and you're looking at everything that you have for leftovers and what you could use as a base and what you could turn into something and how you can stretch it into a meal. Yep. Okay, me and my kids, we're all Italian. Like remember I told you about the restaurant. We're trained to, what can we make out of this? I think more importantly for me though too, it's about no waste. Everything has to have a destination tag. And I'm also thinking like a business person, right? And I've studied the model in the industry, and the intensity between having to come up with so much capital for high inventory is what puts most brands out of business. So they have an interruption in their supply and then interruption of their capital. That makes it almost impossible to be successful, which is really like only why 1% of spirits brands that launch are really around a couple of years later. So in my model, I said, ethanol is what comes off the still. And that's the thing that makes you drunk. Okay, when you take that ethanol and you collect it, it's basically moonshine, right? A clear fluid. If you take that then and you put it into a barrel, you're going to start to make a whiskey. If you take that and you put it into a new charred oak barrel and make sure that it's a minimum of 51% corn base, it's going to start to be a bourbon. If you take it and put it into a brown sugar barrel, it's just going to be an aged whiskey. If you don't put that ethanol in a barrel and you proof it down, it's going to become a vodka. If you then take it and don't proof it down as far and soak a bunch of juniper and goji berries and tarragon and 14 other botanicals, you're going to now make a compound gin. If you then take it and you add flavors to it, you're going to make a flavored vodka. If you combine some of these options, you're going to make a distilled spirit specialty. So, or a spirit whiskey or a white dog. That all happens out of one still. So that you can make all those things by just positioning. Now, if you're going to do our rums are done out of molasses and sugarcane. That's a separate process. And the rums are really committed to being rums, except for the fact that I then go back and I take our rums and I'll put them in our old bourbon barrels, and now I'll start to age it that way. Or I'll take our rye, part of the rye mash that we used with the bourbon, and put that in cognac barrels, and now I've got rye whiskey aging in cognac barrels. So you see how you're starting to come up with all kinds of different, but yet all I did is go into the kitchen sink and the fridge and mix it all together. So I called getting it to that spot a stem cell. And then with our model, it's just in time manufacturing. It's kind of like design a liquor. We get it so far that it's not committed to being something in a bottle, but it's ready to go to get to the next step fairly quickly. And that's how we make all our products. And then we do crazy things when there's only a little bit left of one thing and there's not enough to do a production run, then we blend it with something else. And then you get a vodka and a rum blended together. Craziness.
That's
like all kinds of
I'm sitting there like I used to be a huge rum guy before I converted to whiskey, and I still drink rum on occasion, but I'm like, it's got to be a good rum because there is a whole different flavor to rum. And then I drink vodka. Like I said, I'm not married to just one particular thing, but no, I just feel like, whiskey has just a different, certain thing to it, but I will definitely have, mix it up wherever I'm at, or if, someone doesn't have one thing, I'm not going to be biased to it. I'll do whatever. But I love the fact that you're playing with, different alcohols, like it's an experiment, it's like, why not? Right. Why not?
Yeah.
Mix the two together.
It's alchemy.
Yeah, and call it a VUM, a vodka rum or a Roca, or whatever you want to call it. But to me, I just love that. And that's probably what makes you, different anyway, and unique in your, distillery and everything. Well, for some closing thoughts, I just wanted to kind of let you take the reins for a couple seconds. We've gotten your entire story. I mean, obviously, in a nutshell. I'm just talking about from, having kids at a young age, from Avon at 9 to, blowing up and doing what you're doing now with the distillery. And I will be, coming out there. Like I said, I'll have to come out and, visit.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
But I'm a huge traveler. My wife and I take many trips a year. It's just the COVID kind of threw us off. So who knows? Maybe in the fall we'll come out there when it's a little more, not so sticky and not so cold, somewhere in between. Yeah, so if there's anything you want to kind of put out there for the last, 2 or 3 minutes before we go off, I'd love to hear it, because every time you talk, I'm just, I'm taking in a whole bunch of information on my own.
I'll talk to you about the greatest challenge for me has been raising capital for the expansions. When you're an innovator like I am and business, you're always attached to a vision, because it's easy to begin with the end in mind and get to the next step. Plus, I've been practicing this for a few decades.
Yeah.
So you're always considered a startup by the definition of traditional capital raising, because if you know what you're doing, you're always expanding. And so it's a new project. It's a new horizon that you've set a new benchmark. A lot of people will stay in their mode and stay in their lane and run their operations that way. When you're very creative like I am, and we talked about, you said the energy. I'm like the Energizer Bunny. I just run around. But you see things when you're a visionary and you do see things, there's always a reach. And I think that being an innovative leader, especially moving forward, the products that come out that are going to emerge as product leaders in the marketplace are going to come from the people who were meant to be leaders to create new emerging trends. And so that's my greatest challenge. We expanded in January, went from 10,000 square feet to 24,000 square feet with a plan of doing events and concerts and weddings. And then COVID hit and all that was shut down. And so I had almost triple my overhead with no revenue to come against it while we quickly pivoted. And so I recently put in a NBA regulation basketball court into our empty space. Dynamic sports teams came in and said, hey, how about we partner and we use this space for training kids for the NBA and giving these kids who got locked out of their gyms and the Y and the schools a chance to continue to train. And that's been a great blessing. And he is very motivated about creating walk-on scholarships for kids and really kid oriented. And I had a bunch of kids that played basketball. I sat on basketball benches for almost that 17 years, probably longer, watching all my kids play. And they were good with state records, pretty amazing. And some even played Division II basketball. So that pivot and that ability to think outside the box and go is what you need to do. But every time you go there and all right, I've got to change here, then it requires capital. I have built this out of cash flow, the most arduous way to build a manufacturing business to begin with, which is almost unheard of. People will go out and raise millions of dollars to put a facility together or to just build a brand, even as a marketing agency. I didn't want to argue the value of a new disruptive platform with a woman in the space without these kinds of innovations having come to the forefront. Oh, people would say they would give me money, but they want 75, 80% of the company. And that was going to really, put a drone on my creativity. So it was also hard to communicate this vision to most people because it was just new, right? It was just, again, being a change agent. So I had to do it on my own. And it's been really hard to do that. Now that I've proven I could do it, and I'm at the space where I know that I can make a difference, a tremendous difference in this space, I need to find strategic partners who can embrace a woman-owned distillery with our incubation branding space and really help us take it to the next level. Because there's DC and Vegas, I believe, are two of the maybe 4 or 5 states that actually have a law that says those casinos, oh, New Jersey is another one with Atlantic City, have to buy 40%, a minimum of 40% of their purchases have to come from women-owned distilleries. But how many of there are there of us? There's not very many, but that's an actual law. So that's what I'd like to say is, like, I am challenged with, I hate to pull that card and say there are discrimination laws in the United States. We need to get into this space, and this is a wonderful space for women. But if we don't get supported and we aren't honored for what we bring I have an intolerance for the injustice. And, you know, we just celebrating our 100-year right to vote, right? It's the fact that we have to celebrate the fact that women actually have the right to vote, and African-American women didn't even have 100 years. So it's really an interesting play to be driving change in a male-dominated industry, but also just very archaic and traditional industry. And so that's what I would ask for. I would ask for strategic partners who could help me continue to pave this way, because we're doing great things. Well,
Like, this is real. We definitely need to make some change, you know, and I feel like that's, you know, I think you mentioned you've been a public speaker, you've gone and spoken at all these platforms. I just feel like I like the term Pixie. I mean, I feel like you're spreading pixie dust everywhere you go. You know, it's positivity, positivity, positivity. I don't think you said one negative thing, and you didn't even talk bad about the way it was. You just said that's the way it is, and I just want to make a change. You never really downplayed it or made it sound bad. So I feel like it's been such a joy to have you on the show today. And I know that other platforms have probably had you on. I'm sure they've spoken the same way. I can't imagine anyone that leaves a conversation with you feels negative or feels like you're not doing amazing things. But I just want to thank you for allowing me the time to do this interview, because I feel it's like my privilege, you know, to interview you for sure.
I appreciate. I'm humbled, honestly. I'm really humbled, and you don't even know how you stepped up to a call to action. Again, the universe just is. We're all energy. It's neither created nor destroyed, right? It simply transfers form. So you heard whatever it was that was in your heart and had the courage to step forward and follow your heart. And so I'm so delighted that, again, you reached out for whatever it was to find a hat or something. I'm like, oh, that's not my department, but hey, who are you?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how the pixie dust goes.
Yeah,
I say all roads lead to the pixie.
I like that. I like that.
Okay.
Just thank you for your time, and have a good night with your family and whatever you do for the rest of the night. And we'll just communicate via email for the time being.
Thank you so much for your graciousness.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Cheers.